making friends as an adult is tough. And I was also never someone that really had hobbies. As you can see with the bike, I'm very much an all or nothing type of person. So I think for me, the point I was in my life, that even though the bike has become a huge part of it, it's been a positive thing because it's definitely opened up an opportunity to make more friends and have more, just social interactions and things to do and better relationships. And it's also like I'm a lot healthier than I was then. So yes, it has become a huge part of the identity, but I think, not that I was in like a negative space by any means before I was starting, but it was just, it's a much different place. And I feel better about where I am now because I have, some health, some fitness, and more friends and more relationships and, a hobby that has taken over my life. But yeah.
What's going on, everybody? My name is JP, and I want to welcome you to the Stable Cyclist Podcast, where we talk about bikes, life mentality, and when the occasion arises, we will dive deep into mental health. My guest today is Colleen Maher, but before we get into the interview with Colleen, I want to remind you that the Stable Cyclist Podcast is brought to you by Flow Formulas. If you are training for a big race or you're just trying to be healthy as you train, Flow Formulas endurance mix or chews or gels or recovery mix or all kinds of other things like their electrolyte mix are what you're looking for. And when you go to purchase those, you can use the code JohnPeter15 at checkout to get a little bit of that price knocked down on your goodies. Over the past 3 months, the show has continued to grow, and we have already blown away the numbers from all of 2024 in the first 3 months of this year. That means there's a lot of new people listening, and a lot of you might have questions or things you want to ask. And we do an Ask JP Anything episode every so often, and you can get those questions in. You could leave a comment on a YouTube video, or you could leave it on Spotify. You could send us a DM on Instagram at The Stable Cyclist, or you could send me an email, thestablecyclist@gmail.com, and we will be sure to aggregate all those questions and answer them on our next Ask JP Anything. All right, enough of all that. Let's get Colleen in the studio. Well, Colleen Maher, welcome to the Stable Cyclist Podcast, and This is a different one in that, like, normally I come in and I have like a whole notebook full of stuff. It literally just says new to cycling and national champ. That's all I got. There's not a lot out there on you, even creeping through your Instagram, but you come highly recommended from previous guests. And I am really interested in a lot of your story, and I think you can answer some questions that maybe other people can't. So welcome to the Stable Cyclist Podcast. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm pretty excited to do this and just share more of, I think, like a pretty unique journey that I've had.
100%. So, Colleen, we usually start things off here with what we would call like a zero to hero, or like I've never ridden a bike to I'm holding a pro license. And I think we're somewhere all in the middle with you. And I think that's what makes this so unique, is that your story to getting into cycling is relatively new, if I'm correct. And so, like, let's just, I think we kind of need to tell that story first, and then we can dive into other things. But yeah, how did you come into this wonderful sport?
Yeah, for sure. So it is pretty recent. And really, if I was just to give it like a one sentence summary, I basically went from being a couch potato to a national champion in 3 years. Like as a kid, I played sports growing up, but it was more just to be like well-rounded. My parents encouraged us to do sports, do clubs, study, music, all the things. I was definitely never someone who considered myself like an athlete. So then when I went to college, I actually went to music school. So my degree is in classical music. Still no bikes, still no sports or anything at that time. And after college is when I moved to Western North Carolina. So I'm in Brevard now, which has a huge cycling, huge bike community. But I still mostly just hung out with my friends. I spent a lot of time at breweries, watched a lot of TV. And that's just what I did for years. Like, even though there was so much biking here, I never got into it. And then the pandemic hit in 2020. And, that summer, my husband and I are just kind of home hanging out, probably going a little stir crazy. And I decided I wanted to get a Peloton bike, which is a stationary bike that has some just really good spin classes. So we got that in the summer. I barely ever rode it. So then that January, I was like, all right, New Year's resolution, I'm going to ride it every single day in January. And I did 15-minute classes. I think at the end I did like one 30-minute class, and I was like, wow, like that was a big day. That was a big ride. Like I went from doing absolutely nothing to now doing, a little bike ride every day. And that's how I got started on that journey. And then so on the Peloton, they have like all the data, they have your power numbers, and you can kind of see like if you're improving, how you are compared to other people in the class. And I think not only the data nerd in me, but also the competitive person, I was like, I'm getting better. This is cool. This is fun. Yeah. So then in spring of 2021, I decided I wanted to get an outdoor bike. We live in a great area for it. But if you recall, spring of 2021, bike stuff and bike supply was really, really hard to come by. Yep. And I ride a pretty small bike, so it took a long time to actually find a bike. But I did end up getting a gravel bike. And I think one of the things that made me really enjoy it is living in the mountains. It's really hard to go from having no fitness to riding a bike because you have to literally climb a mountain every ride. So there was a lot of fitness I had from just doing those 15-minute Peloton classes that going out and riding in the real world, I was able to actually enjoy it instead of just struggling the entire time. So that summer just kind of rode a little bit around, like 5 miles, ride to the brewery, just like a little bit, just getting outside and stuff. And then in the winter of 2022, we had some friends that were like, hey, we're going to go do a 100-mile gravel race, like come with us and do it. And I was like, 100 miles? That's insane to ride your bike that long. But this might be a funny story. We actually, my husband and I, we bought one of Dylan Johnson's training plans on Training Peaks to get you ready for like your first 100-mile ride. So we followed that every night in our basement. We would go down, ride the stationary bikes to get ready, to ride that 100 miles. So we went out, we rode it, we did the race. And after it, everyone was like, oh my God, like that was so hard. I never want to do that again, but it's cool we did it. And I was like, I kind of really liked that. And I actually even got third place in that race. And it's not like I didn't train over the winter and all of a sudden like become a monster on the bike. There was still an hour and a half between first and third. But when that's one of like your first races and your first experiences, like it's really cool that happened and like gives you some confidence, makes you feel good about it. So that was like my first journey into like the 100 miles and the long distance. And then after that, I did end up getting a mountain bike. I did a mountain bike race that summer, and kind of similar situation. I kind of accidentally got on the podium again for that. And we were driving home. It was a local race. We went to our local bike shop after because they had a coffee and smoothie shop at the time, ordering some smoothies. And then I hear someone behind me say something like, oh, like second place or podium, like congratulations, that's so cool. And I'm like, who's this? And it's one of the guys that work there. And I was like, oh, I guess he really like follows racing because like it just ended a couple hours ago. Guess he just keeps up with it. And he said, I coach if you're ever interested in that. And I'm like, what's bike coaching? Like, how do you even do that? I don't get it. He's like, I can give you workouts and different types of rides and just, help structure things so that you can accomplish goals, get stronger, all that. And I was like, that's cool, but, kind of sounds expensive. So I'm good. Thanks. And I think for the next month, my husband was like, I think you should do it. I think you should sign up for it. Like very encouraging, like, let's give it a shot and, see what bike coaching is like. So I decided to sign up for coaching and, I'm actually still with the same coach. He's great. And that's kind of how I got into riding bikes, structured training, and racing. And, so since then, like I've won amateur gravel nats. I raced at Worlds. I did Unbound. This year I'm on Dirt Camp Racing on their elite off-road team. I'm working with Cane Creek, riding the invert gravel fork. And I'm also competing for one of the lifetime wildcard spots. So I'll be back at Sea Otter and Unbound. So yeah, it's been a very exponential journey getting to this point, like over the last 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, that is one wild ride that you just described.
Yeah.
A couple, like, I want to go back to, so a big reason I wanted to talk to every female guest I've had on this show, we talk about the barriers of entry for women in this sport compared to the barriers of entry for men. And how do we overcome that? And so when I heard your story for the first time, I was really curious about, like, you got a rocket ship strapped to your back, and you went from like nothing to very elite quickly. And how did you overcome some of those hurdles? And so, like, the first question I had while you were just sharing there, you're talking about, I'm doing these Peloton workouts. A Peloton community is one thing. To go out and ride in a group with real live humans is a whole other universe. And so how did you kind of cross that initial threshold? Because I've often said, like, one of the more vulnerable moments that I've really heavily felt in my life, and maybe this speaks to my privilege, but was being at my first road race and just being like, I'm so out of water here right now. And I'm a white dude, right? So I can't even imagine what it's like for a female. And so tell us about that experience of kind of like moving from like, oh, I have this safe Peloton community in my house to I'm with a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. It's definitely more intimidating, I think, as a woman, just because, like, it is a boys' club. Like, when, like, you know, you don't necessarily mean it, and there's nothing gonna be bad, but, like, you're just in the minority with it. And then also just, for me at least, feeling like I'm so inexperienced in it, it can be tough to go into a bike shop even, because bike shops, like, there's so much you have to know about bikes. And if someone asks you a question about your bike, you're like, I don't know, I just ride it. So it can be, you know, pretty tough. I think as far as like crossing the threshold to like move from my basement, which is really safe, into getting out into the world and riding, I am pretty lucky that, so my husband, he started like training and racing the same time as me, but he had just ridden bikes casually for like a decade or so leading up to that. So I'm pretty just fortunate and lucky that he had some of that experience. So I could like always lean on him as like the safe person, or like my safe space of, you know, hey, let's go out and ride. And I didn't have to be completely alone or like try to find people to go out and be with. And that is definitely a huge help. And then again, I think I remember the first time I went to our local Tuesday night Worlds, you know, like the road ride that happens with some spots. It's like, I wanted to go so bad, but it's also really intimidating because those are a lot of the fast guys, and it's riding in a group. And I mean, having someone in your group who hasn't ridden in a group before, like that can be really just chaotic because I don't have experience with it. We're going high speeds and there are turns, and, you know, it can be a tough thing, especially when I'm aware that there are so many things I don't know, and I don't want to do the wrong thing or make a mistake and, you know, ruin the ride for other people. So just I think having the desire to go do the ride more than like having that outweigh your fear of like things going wrong, is really useful. But also, like, again, having my husband as that safe person, like, hey, can you come do this with me and we'll do it together, has been huge. So that first ride that we went to, like, you know, one of my fears is just, hey, like, what if I can't keep up? And I think being on the other side now where like, I know I can, no problem, like any advice I would give is like, everyone's out there just because they want to ride and they want to be friends and meet new people too. So like, even if you can't, you know, keep up as well, like that's okay. A lot of times like the group will regroup or they'll slow down. Like, you might not even notice that it was for you. So like, you don't have to like feel bad or intimidated because everyone's out there just to like ride together. And that really is like the core of why we're all out there. So try not to feel intimidated just because you are new or worry that you might not keep up or be inexperienced.
Keep going. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, you're good. And I just remember, so I'm on the shorter side. And I remember on that first group ride, like there was someone he's a pretty tall guy. He's like 6'4". And I had met him several times before. And I'm like, oh, like, we're friendly. We're friends, like nice guy. And we were, two lines, and I was on the inside, like towards the grass, and he's on the outside, and we're riding together. We're just like chatting, like we're literally having a conversation. But in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, like, why does this guy keep like pushing me off the road? Like, we're doing a group ride. This isn't a race. Like, why are you trying to drive me off the road? And what I finally realized is that was just my perception, because he was just so much bigger than me that I felt like I was getting pushed out, but like he was literally just riding in a straight line. So I think too that just like having more experience in the group rides like that, and like my perception that I had was due to my inexperience, not even necessarily people doing anything. So just like being aware too of, yeah, sometimes it can be intimidating and hard, but also like don't let your perception ruin your experience sometimes too.
100%. Colleen, what do you do for a job these days with your music performance major from college?
I don't use that degree at all. And it was a really unique experience, like studying classical music. I played the oboe. I made my own reeds. I learned how to play all the instruments. But about halfway through college, I realized I didn't want to teach. I didn't want to perform. I didn't feel like I was good enough to perform. And I was like, well, I don't really know what to do with this. But then you're so far into the music program, and that doesn't transfer like your credits to anything. So I was like, well, I guess I'm getting a music degree. So I added a minor in marketing, and I ended up doing digital marketing for a while. And that's, still part of what I do now. So yeah, it was kind of the transition of not going to use my music degree. Let's get a minor in something else that I can do.
Sure. All that is set up for just you at some point. You're, training to complete a 100-mile gravel race is way different from training to be competing at the front and trying to win these gravel races. And I'm guessing the training load, as A, you were able to handle it, but B, you were able to just go, you needed to go do more. How was that balance and that training load balance, I guess? How was that for you? And are you still kind of working through it as you just continue to try and become more elite in what you're doing?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have a pretty flexible schedule. So it was maybe it was like 2 years ago. I think I was talking to my coach, and I was like, hey, like I have some more time. Like, let's load on more hours, because as fun as racing is, I also genuinely just really enjoy riding my bike, and I really like training. I like hitting the intervals. I like going for long rides. Like, I just genuinely enjoy it. So we started adding on some more volume just because I had time and wanted to. And since then, like, depending where we are in the season, we're still adding on more and more volume. And because like you're saying, like, I don't have 5 or 10 or 15 years of cumulative volume, or even just like history of training, like a lot of people my age racing do. I don't have that. So, I mean, even now, like, we're still kind of towing the line of how much volume can we add before it's too much, and then stepping back. So like, last year and even this year, it's like I'm still trying to find that limit without going over it. So it's definitely a balance of figuring out how to listen to your body, and is it expected fatigue because of the volume, or are you towing the line of this is too much and we need to back it down? So yeah, just being in a lot of communication with my coach about that is really helpful, because I definitely don't want to overdo it, but I do want to push it as much as I can.
Sure. So another thing is, you're kind of going through this transition from, couch potato to national champ, where we are now, where I'm sure there's a point where it just feels like cycling is more and more and more a part of who you are. Yeah. And how did you, maybe you've managed it really well, But I think a lot of people, when we get really passionate about a sport or an activity, it can swallow our identity if we're not careful with it. And so I kind of want to hear how you worked through that, or maybe how you are currently working through it continually as things continue to change.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that it has become a huge part of who I am, just because it's my hobby and I spend so much time doing it. I spend so much time learning more about it, or, researching what tires I want to run, and just like, what are these other advantages I can get and what else can I do? Like, I enjoy it to the point of more than just riding. I want to know, like I said, what tire pressure do I want to run here? Like, what components are best, and just trying different things. And you do spend so much time doing it. And, it's wild because 4 years ago, none of this was a part of my life. Like, I didn't, it's just like, it's a completely
you had to learn a new vocabulary. Yeah, you had to learn a new vocabulary and a language. Yeah.
I was like, I didn't know what an FTP was, but yeah, like it's been truly wild because it's completely different. It's been a positive journey though for me, because I think, I graduated college, I moved to North Carolina, and I didn't have like a group of friends or a family here. Like, I didn't know anyone when I moved here. So I think, even making friends as an adult is tough. And I was also never someone that really had hobbies. As you can see with the bike, I'm very much an all or nothing type of person. So I think for me, the point I was in my life, that even though the bike has become a huge part of it, it's been a positive thing, because it's definitely opened up an opportunity to make more friends and have more, just social interactions and things to do and better relationships. And it's also like, I'm a lot healthier than I was then. So yes, it has become a huge part of the identity, but I think, not that I was in like a negative space by any means before I was starting, but it was just, it's a much different place. And I feel better about where I am now because I have, some health, some fitness, and more friends and more relationships, and, a hobby that has taken over my life. But yeah, it's been a positive journey for me.
For sure. So when you're talking about getting people, the reality is like, for most women that we're trying to get into this amazing sport, they're probably not going to go on the journey that you got to experience. And that's okay, right? That doesn't it doesn't downplay your experience, and it doesn't like glorify anything else. It's just, that's the reality. Is your biggest sell to getting people into the sport? You said making friends as an adult is tough. Like, that's a reality that is, I think a lot of us are afraid to say out loud, but we all can feel it. Is that a big sell of like, this is just how you get to meet more people?
I think it is, because, we think about, my husband and I will say sometimes on like a random Sunday that we both actually have off the bike, which is pretty rare. We're like, what did we used to do with ourselves? And it's like, we had our small group of friends that we would just hang out with, go to the breweries, go drink, whatever. And when I look at our lives now, like, we have met so many more people. We have so many more friendships and relationships. And, I think especially if you're like changing jobs or moving, it's easy to feel like you're more alone, or just like get distant from people you used to be close with. Because, it can also be hard to keep in touch with people if they're not close by. And now it's like, if we go to events or just like clinics that are happening in the area, it's like, we know so many more people. Like, we went to Southern Cross to race the other weekend, and it was like, oh, like, there's our friend, there's our other friend. Like, we just found we had so many more friends than we ever used to have, which has been really nice for, just going out and doing things and just experiencing life with. So I do think that, having a hobby and something you do, whether it's cycling or something else, if you're looking for a way to get involved and have more relationships or have more friends, like, it is a great way to build your community with something that you have in common with other people. It's a good way to find more people.
So let's talk about gravel nationals. I'm not big on this podcast into like the minutia of how everything played out. I'm more interested in like what you were thinking through the whole process of like I don't care about your tire pressure. Like I'm tired of that conversation. I get that it is like a necessary thing. I think about it a lot too, but like there's a lot of other podcasts that talk about it and do a great job. So I want to hear how you were feeling, what you were thinking as this was playing out, and all of a sudden you're standing on the top step.
Yeah. So I am very, I guess, detail oriented, because something that makes me feel better going to a race and makes me feel less anxious leading up to it and like standing on the start line is knowing I'm as prepared as possible. So this was, I think, the only race I've done where I didn't have like a team going. My husband wasn't able to come. Like I ended up knowing other people that were there, but like I was going alone and had to be self-sufficient. And it was the biggest race I had on my calendar. And I was going with the mindset of like, I'm here to win. Like whether it's second place, fifth place, like that's all the same to me. Like I'm here to win or nothing. So like I could very easily put a lot of pressure on myself for that and like, get too in your head. So one of the things that was really important for me leading into that, like even 3 weeks out, was I had lists going of everything like, oh, this is what I'm going to get from the grocery store. This is what I'm having delivered from Amazon. Like this is the schedule I'm going to stick to each day. I make a spreadsheet of everything I'm going to pack and which bag it's in, and is it packed or is it just in the pile? Just as a way to help eliminate any unknowns or like, oh no, did I forget this? Yeah. And it just helps me feel mentally more calm and less anxious going into the race.
Sure. Are you a list maker in the rest of your life? Is that a big part of like managing your daily anxieties and like just keeping things under control?
For the most part, I would say yeah, because it just helps me like, oh, I don't forget anything. It's here. It's written down. If it's not on the shopping list, it's not going in the cart, So yeah, that definitely helps.
Right on.
Yeah.
So you're making all these lists. You're getting ready to pack. Keep going with your story. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh no, you're good. Yeah. So I get to Gehrig, Nebraska, which is difficult to get to. Like there's nothing there. Very, very small area. And I build my bike. I go out, I ride my bike. I go to my hotel room and I just like basically sit there in the dark. Like I was reading a book for like anytime I wasn't on the bike. And I ran into some friends, like hung out for a little bit. But for me, I know what I needed to stay calm and like stay focused and feel okay was just to like read a book, but stay calm, like not engage too much with other people, because then like my mind will start wandering. They'll ask questions about like your bike setup and stuff. And like, I just wanted to stay calm because I felt so prepared going into it. Again, like with the list, but like my training leading up to it, I was like, I feel so good on the bike right now that I don't need anything to like come up that just makes me like second guess or derail anything. So just like staying calm, quiet, and dark. And leading into the start line that morning, do my warm up, feel good. And you're actually not allowed to wear headphones, they said. And the race is 130 miles. It's a long time to be out there in silence. So I did bring like one headphone just to like wear at the start line with like, a lot of loud, heavy music just yelling at me, just to like really more than anything, not hear everyone else and what they're all saying and talking about. And then when we started, like I just threw it in my pocket. And I knew like the race was going to be so hard for the first hour because of the age group. It was all just a mass start. So just try, like, my goal basically was like, okay, the race is 1 hour. Like you're riding as hard as you can for 1 hour, and just reminding yourself that you need to be so aggressive to not get dropped, to, have good positioning, not let anyone in, not let any gaps open. And basically like my mindset was just thinking of the race in increments, I guess. So like the first hour, have to stay with everyone. And then the middle of the race was like, we have to conserve and be patient, which was really tough to do at the start because I was, I guess not the first, but like I had gotten popped from the group. Like all of a sudden, like, oh, my power is gone. I'm not pedaling anymore. and there were still like two women up there, and I was like, that's the race, like I have to go. But something like, I guess my gut was just telling me like, hey, we still have like basically 100 miles of riding left, which is a lot. There's a lot of time to make up space there. There's a lot of time for, things to happen up ahead. So like, there was just something I guess in my gut that was like, hey, even though they're going ahead, like this is where you're at now. And I just have to trust my instinct that was like, hey, we're just going to be patient here. Like, I know what my strengths are. I'm familiar with some of the other riders. I know what their strengths are. And from experience, like, I think this is the right move right now to just be patient and not completely blow up. And that was a really hard decision to make because you're watching other people ride away. And luckily it did pay off. That is what happened. I think it was like an hour later, caught back up and regrouped with everyone. And I was like, oh, thank God that worked. And, yeah, so then like, it was just a long time, just the middle of the race, just trying to, keep the pace up, keep the pace going. And then the last like 20 miles is where it was like the only hill of the day. And then it went into like a false flat that was mostly downhill. So once you made it over the hill, the finish was pretty quick. And at that point, we've been riding for 110 miles. I didn't realize it was like 95 degrees. So it was so hot, like you're just exhausted. And all I could think about was just keep your head down and ride because we are so close to the finish. Like there was some stuff that happened, but like we thought we were chasing another woman down. And I'm like, I think we can catch her if we keep this pace up. Like we have to keep going. Like can't think about anything else. And there was a group of us that were all working pretty well together leading up to that one final hill. And I was leading going into it. And like halfway up it, I look back and like there's a gap. And it was just like, the clarity of the moment where it's like, all right, this is it. Head down, do not let off the pedals, and you just have to absolutely smash it for the next like 30 minutes into the finish. And I ended up passing the woman that we were getting information like at the aid stations, like, oh, there's a woman ahead. Sure. So I was like, well, I hope this is her because there were 2 miles left. And so I passed her and then ended up finishing. But again, there was kind of confusion of like, where are we? Because it is a mass start. Yeah. And at the aid stations, we were getting information that there was another woman ahead of us, but like we hadn't seen her all day. So we were like, how did that happen? So I pull out my phone when I finish, and USAC required that we had like tracking information sent to them all day over the 7.5 hours. And I also use 3 Feet Cycling for drop bags, who is great. They also had their different tracking systems. So my phone was at 4%. And I got a text from my husband. He's like, you did it. You won. I'm like, are you sure? So what ended up happening is the woman we passed that we were getting information that she was up ahead is she had actually started with the elite field 15 minutes ahead of us. So in the timing, she was showing us like still grouped with us, but okay. She was in a different field. But I mean, it was still really cool. And I'm grateful that I did pass her at the end because as far as I know, at a race, like that was the person up ahead that we had to claw back and pass her at the finish. So it was a really good race. And yeah, I don't know, like if your question is like, how do you stay just mentally on it for, 7.5 hours in 95-degree heat? I don't know. I did it, but it's just like, you just have to stay on it and just have that one single goal in mind. And yeah, for me, it was definitely, I talked a lot of strategy with my coach and just knowing my game plan really well of we're going to ride as hard as possibly can for the start. You're going to conserve as much in the middle while like maintaining your pace and then like go absolutely as hard as you can at the end, like a lot of long distance races. And just like being really, really clear that that's what I needed to do.
Yeah. So you said before, like I was going there to win, right? And it's one thing to go into the race, like I'm going there to win. It's a whole nother thing to be standing on the podium as they put a Stars and Stripes jersey on you at the end. How did that feel? And then I guess I want to kind of transition to, at that point in your mind, there is no world championships that I think you're preparing for at this point. Am I correct in that?
So I actually
Or did you
dual
know that was
qualified, I
coming?
guess, to go to Worlds because I won Highlands Gravel, which was the only world
Okay.
qualifier in the US. I won that in April.
Okay. Okay. So you kind of had that in your head, but you win the national title and then you're off to Worlds. And at some point there's this human condition in us that just wants more and more and more. And at the same time, often as we go through that process, imposter syndrome can creep in hard and tell us like, it's not like you don't really belong here at all. And so again, like I'm curious just with the arc of your story, how have you kind of managed all of that?
Yeah. I mean, zipping on the jersey on the podium was an unreal moment, and it definitely didn't settle in that I even won at that point and like what it meant and how I would feel because,
Yeah.
you're exhausted, it's new, it's like, all right, cool. I have to wake up in 6 hours to fly out of here. So yeah, it definitely took a while to sink in, especially because like my race season wasn't over. I was still trying to like, get anything out of my legs that I could for Worlds and then Big Sugar. So I think it didn't really sink in until over the winter that it was like, hey, I had a goal of winning the national championships and you did it. Like that's hanging up. Like I got that. I won that. I not only put in the work to be strong enough to be in contention for it, but having only started riding 3 years ago, I also had to put in a lot of work and practice of racecraft and race strategy and try to
Yeah,
have all
of
of that
course.
come together. So yeah, it really started sinking in more so over the winter. And for me, it actually did it and still is doing the opposite of imposter syndrome.
Okay.
Because I think being relatively inexperienced and all of a sudden like being at the front of a lot of races, it's like for a long time I definitely felt like a fraud and like I don't belong here. Everyone here, they know so much more. They have so much more experience. Like what am I doing here? Like this is I don't belong here. Even though I do and like some of the elite races that I've done too, like you have to apply to be in and like I got into
Yeah.
them, but it's still hard because I'm like, wow, like look at all these big names. Like they're real and like I don't belong here. But having the stars and stripes in the national champion jersey, that actually helped me feel a little bit more legitimate and feel like, okay, you can get this together. Like you do belong here. And it definitely helped, yeah, me feel like I belong there. And it proved to myself that all the work I'm doing and like riding your bike that much, it takes a lot out of,
Yeah.
all facets of your life. And it kind of made me feel like, hey, it's worth it. You're accomplishing something that you wanted to accomplish and you belong. So yeah, it definitely did for me the opposite of imposter syndrome. Yeah, it
That's
helped
awesome.
eradicate that.
That's awesome. You are with a team now. I see that you have a partnership with Cane Creek, and I'm sure you have others that I'm not remembering. But do you remember the first like real sponsorship or partnership that you got, and what was that like back and forth like, and like how much did you jump up and down and celebrate when you got the like we're fully behind you?
Yeah, so I think the very first one I got was actually Gulo Composites, which is a wheel
Yep.
maker in Brevard. They do carbon composite spokes. And it was so cool because, like, you see all these other riders and everyone I'm watching, and they're like, they have sponsors and, stickers on their jersey and all this stuff. And I'm like, and like, I think the reason I really wanted one was because, again, it was another way to just feel more legit.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were like, yeah, let's work together. And I was so excited. It was definitely a moment of like, oh, this is cool. Like people want me riding their stuff too, not just I want to ride your stuff and, like work together. So yeah, that was really amazing, a lot of fun. And just like how it's grown since then with my other partners and sponsors has been it's been quite a journey. It's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I do think that when you get those first partnerships and you're just fighting so hard, often that's the kind of thing that makes the imposter syndrome fade away for a little while, where you're just like, somebody appreciates me for who I am and they take me seriously for how hard I'm working. And that's why you do jump up and down when they, you read the email or you get the message from the marketing person that like, yep, we're with you. So one more question before we, get into some goofier stuff. If you're talking to, and this is going to be more like a training idea, because I look at how you started out and you said I was doing 15-minute rides and I was doing 20-minute rides and I stacked them. If you're talking to somebody who's totally getting into cycling, because I fear when we talk about cycling so much of the time, in our heads we're imagining Keegan Swenson or we're imagining Sophia. And the reality is those people are in the sport already who are like that. Mm-hmm. And the people that we're trying to get more into the sport maybe fit more with the person who's DFL at Mid-South. And how do we get that person involved? And how do we get them riding enough to participate and feel this community and feel these things? And so you literally started at the bottom, or you started, on your couch. How do you, from a training point of view, do you nudge that person along to get them to where they can start to do this awesome stuff?
Yeah, it's a good question, because one of the things that I spend and have spent a decent amount of time thinking about is, like you said, we watch Keegan, we watch Sophia, we watch everyone who does, Lifetime, and it's like, that's the top 1%, right? That's the pointy end, and we're like, they're so good. But you have to remember, like, that is the 1%. Like, most riders, it's the rest of the 99%, and there's so many more people of varying degrees and skill level and experiences, and also just, like, desires of how and what they want to ride that makes up the majority of people who ride bikes. And, I would definitely say that if you are trying to get into riding or just like want to go and have a good time, start with whatever is easy enough for you that you will go and do it and you will have a good time. Like I said, those 15-minute rides I was doing, like, we say 15 minutes now and that might sound like not a long time, but it was hard. It was so hard. And those 15 minutes, that included a warm up and a cool down. So do what you need to do. If it's a 10-minute ride, go do that. If it's a ride like down your driveway to your mailbox, like get up and do it. And I think also it's more fun if if you can find like a group ride, or if you're worried about like, oh, you can't quite ride with other people yet, like go to a clinic, go to, how to change a flat tire clinic at your local shop. Just look for, an event or something that's going on to get more involved that's at the pace and the level that you want it to be at.
For sure. I think that's really good advice. All right, Colleen, we always end the show with some rapid fire and quite stupid questions. These are fun. It helps that you're a gravel person. My first question is called the gas station question. And if you and I go on a long gravel ride, this is a super long bomb, like 6, 7, maybe 8 hours. We're going to run out of supplies at some point. Don't tell me, well, I'll just bring everything I need. Wrong answer. We're going to run out. And we're going to have to stop at some small rural gas station that has the basic gas station supplies. So what are you getting for food and what are you getting for drink?
Yeah, so if we're just doing a quick stop, I'm probably filling up my bottles with water in the sink and like grabbing a pack of Twizzlers because I love Twizzlers. If we're gonna stop and hang out for just a couple minutes and like it's been a long day, it's hot, we're gonna chill for a second, definitely grabbing a Coke and the Fritos, those like honey barbecue twists.
Oh, that's a good pick.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. All right. You mentioned your fright at nationals over not having music with you, which tells me that normally you have headphones on when you ride. And I want to know, as do all the listeners, what is in your playlist?
Mostly it is people yelling at me. No podcast or anything. It's usually like a lot of rock, heavy metal music. Lately I've been really into the
Fantastic.
Architects. Yeah. There'll be like some divorced dad rock in there. And also some like emo punk rock music from the 2010s.
This is great. I love it. You're one of the few people that has picked like, this is the main genre I stick in. Most people are like, it's all over the place. So this is good stuff.
No, yeah, loud, heavy, and some yelling. I mean, works pretty well.
All right. Next question. Very important answer here. Are you a Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings person?
Oh, Harry Potter.
Okay. Well, then we
Yeah.
have to ask the sorting hat question. And what house do you belong to?
I would be in Ravenclaw.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Well, what would you be
Fair
in?
enough. Don't you see my Slytherin mascot back there?
Oh. Fair enough.
Yeah. If you go look at what their attributes are, you're like, actually, that's not too bad. They're just not good people. But yeah, Slytherin
Right.
for life. All right. What is a race that you have not gotten to do that you are like, I want to go do that? And maybe there's more than one, but let's keep it to
Yeah.
like 3 max.
Oh, 3 max. I would say definitely
Yeah.
the Rift.
Okay.
The Rift is one that's been on my list, like even before I race bikes, of just going to Iceland, and that would be so cool. Yeah, and then I think maybe the Traca one day. And a third one, oh, it's out in, I can't think of the name of it, but it's one that's out in California that has like beautiful scenery. If any of the listeners have watched Tyler Pierce, the vegan cyclist, he's done it and has videos about it.
Well, I think you're
and
talking
I
about the
can't think
rock
of the name of it.
hopper.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That looks
Yeah,
like
that
a
would be
fun
a cool
one
one,
for
I think.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so that's races you want to do. Tell everybody one race that you have already done that they should all go do.
Ooh. So I don't know if everyone should go do it, but if you're considering it, definitely Unbound. It's just such an amazing experience. It takes over the town. Everyone is so into it. Or like you don't necessarily have to do the full 200, but like any of the other distances as well. But if you're interested and curious about the 200, do it because it is just such an amazing feeling once you cross the finish line and you're like, I just did that. I rode my bike that far on pretty tough terrain as far as gravel goes, and it's just such an incredible thing to have been able to do. So if it's on your list, do it.
Outstanding. Well, Colleen, thank
Yeah.
you so much for hanging out today. And hopefully this was as chill as I said it would be.
It was pretty painless.
Thanks for hanging out today. If you enjoyed the episode, first of all, do me a favor and share it with someone who you think would enjoy it as well. And while you're at it, if you haven't given us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please do that. Please and thank you. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and the subscribe button if you are not subscribed to the Stable Cyclist YouTube channel. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for continually sharing the podcast so it can grow and grow and grow. And finally, remember that you are loved.